I'll note too that we will take questions at the conclusion of today's broadcast. You have a box there on your screen where you can type in questions at any point during the program, and we'll be sure to get your questions answered by our expert panelists when we get to the end. Let me begin just by saying a quick word about CFTE. CFTE is the leading research and technical assistance organization focused on transit ballot measures. We've been in business since 2000, compiling a comprehensive data source on ballot measures that relate to investment in transit. You joined us at a particularly interesting and important time for these kinds of ballot measures, with 2016 shaping up to be the biggest year on record, both in terms of the total number of measures going to voters across the country in November and the total amount of potential investment that could be generated by those voters this year. So clearly this webinar is important for those communities looking to the future and thinking about how to generate investment in their communities. A big part of what we do at CFTE, along with our partners at NAPTA, is focus on what the hallmarks of success of these campaigns are. What makes campaigns focused on transit investment successful with voters? And today's topic is certainly among those hallmarks that we have identified. That is, messaging, messages, and the way we deliver those messages truly matter to winning or losing elections. And we are in a period of extraordinary change and innovation, looking at the landscape of candidate campaigns and learning from those efforts, really changing the way we communicate, transit agencies communicate, transit campaigns communicate with voters and citizens. So this is a particularly exciting program. We have a terrific group of panelists joining us today who will give us all the insights into those innovations and what's working with voters. I'm going to briefly introduce all three of them before I turn it over for the presentations. First, we'll hear from Dan Culley. Dan is a partner at the firm of Culley Hall Struble in Seattle. He's a veteran of many campaigns and a longtime friend of CFTE. He's worked on a lot of winning transportation and transit elections. He has a great record of success. And one of the things I love about Dan is that not only does he win a lot of campaigns, he wins the hard races, working in places that aren't easy to win, either for candidates or for ballot measures. So looking forward to his remarks as always. Next up, we'll hear from Morgan Lyons. He's the Assistant VP for Communications and Community Engagement at DART. That's the Dallas Area Rapid Transit Authority. He's also chair of APTA's Marketing and Communications Committee. Morgan was with us earlier in this webinar series when we had a program focused specifically on marketing, messaging, and communications, and he was so popular with all of our listeners that we brought him back for an encore presentation. And I'm sure Morgan will be calling on you again since we're thinking about programming for our conference coming up after the elections happen in November. And then batting cleanup for us will be Teresa Septic. She's the Vice President of Client Relations at DDC Public Affairs, and she works closely with DART and with Morgan, and they're going to sort of tag team their presentation as we move through the program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Culley for his presentation. And again, if you have questions, please enter them into the box, and I'll join you in a few minutes at the conclusion to get to our questions. Thanks again for joining us. Dan?
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. Let me start the presentation. So I am with the firm Culley Hall Struble. We're based in Seattle and have an office in Los Angeles as well. And we work on a lot of transit campaigns and a lot of ballot measures that involve transportation. And our products include television and a lot of digital, which of course we're going to be talking about today, because you can't run a campaign in the world today that doesn't include a strong digital program. So I'm going to talk through just quickly my thoughts on the hows, the whats, the whys of messaging, and then talk through how we actually go about buying digital ads, especially video. We're big believers that video is the key, no matter if it's on television or it's in front of a spot on YouTube or on Facebook. But currently we're working on two campaigns. One is regional Proposition 1 in the Seattle area. It's Sound Transit 3 is the agency, and it's their third generation plan. The campaign is a small price of $54 billion over the next 30 years that will expand light rail to every corner of our region. It is, at the end, there'll be well over 100 miles of light rail. There'll be express bus service expansion, commuter rail expansion. When we're done, there will be 83 stations across Puget Sound. And so this is a big ask of voters. We're right in the middle of the campaign, involved in lots of digital advertising, television advertising, and using a lot of really unique ways to determine our messages and deliver our messaging in this campaign. We're also working on Measure B in Silicon Valley. It is a campaign on the transit side that expands BART into San Jose, plus there's lots of other road improvements to pothole repairs and things that voters really like. This campaign is a unique challenge in that it requires 66.6% to pass. So while the Seattle campaign is a 50 plus one majority, the Silicon Valley campaign to get to those last voters is a big lift. There's no doubt about it. So we're right in the middle of designing strong campaigns. Our overall belief is that there really are three components to messaging that matters, and this applies to whether you're doing direct mail, television, radio, internet, digital, pre-roll, whether it's display online or pre-roll campaigns, video campaigns. There are three components. The why. It's easy to get caught up in we're all transit experts, and we all love transit, and we love improvements to transportation overall. But really what voters need to hear is what's in it for them and why is their own life going to be better. So in our mind, the why of this is the ability that you're going to have more time to spend with your family, that your commute is going to be just a little bit easier. It's not promising the moon, because voters won't believe that. It's promising that there will be incremental improvements in your life. In the Sound Transit 3, the Proposition 1 campaign, we discuss that we're going to get you out of congestion. We're not promising congestion relief, because voters don't necessarily believe that, but we do offer an approach that if we have a whole unique and separate way of moving around the region, that you're going to have an alternative to hopping out and getting in your car and getting stuck in congestion. You'll be able to be on grade-separated transportation that gets you where you want on time and gets you home so that you can read to your children at night, or you can make a meeting, or you can make the church service that you want to attend, or all the multitude of activities that people live in their lives, and that's the importance is the why. Now you can't miss out on the what, and in many campaigns the what isn't hey, there's really bad congestion, because I think voters acutely in many regions across our country feel that every single day, that things are a mess. But the what has to describe something that they know they are buying, that it's a unique package that contains things that they're purchasing, not a promise that things will get better, but they will know that certain lines are being built if it's transit, that certain road improvements will happen in their own communities. It's the what of the package. And the what has to be part of this. And then the other piece of the what is guaranteeing that tax dollars will be spent in a way that voters like, so that there's, whether it's citizen audits or regular check-ins by voters to make sure that the money is being spent in the way that voters have been promised it will. That's what we consider the what. And then the how, here's a quick Facebook ad that we have running, or it's about to run in Silicon Valley for Measure B. And our belief overall is that if voters have this broad idea of what transit or what transportation improvements will happen, it sounds like it's for somebody else. But the ability of digital, the ability of cable, but even digital, where we're able to go and target in such a profound way and deliver 15, 20, 30 different versions of ads that people hear very specific ways that their own commute times will be improved is essential for success. So we were involved with a campaign in 2005 to defeat the repeal of a gas tax in Washington State, and we ran specific specific mail and cable ads, and we created 16 different versions of those cable ads and 16 different versions of all the mail that we sent out, and in the end we were successful. These days it's even more exciting what we're able to do as far as taking a voter file, determining undecideds, and then pulling out those undecideds and matching that with demographic and geographic targets across the voting populace. It makes all the difference, and voters want to hear how their own lives will be improved, and that's exactly what we think these tools provide us. So then I just want to describe a little bit how digital works, and I know there's a lot of experts on the line that understand this, but I want to describe what we think is the approach that we're taking with the campaigns we're involved with. So our focus is really, of course, we start with polling data, and all successful campaigns have conducted a poll, and so we start with that data. But then, of course, especially if the voter file in a particular state or region has transit scores or other livability scores or what have you, we continue to refine the targets that we want to reach, and then we match those targets with our relationships with Google DoubleClick and Facebook and many others to pull out a list of targeted voters with cookies on their home computers and on mobile, so that we're able to then reach very particular voters and communicate with them. Again, we strongly believe that video is the right approach, or that should be a dominant form of this communication, because voters really are moved by video, because it provides them with something that interrupts their life from what they're doing. They have to pay attention, they have to listen, they have to watch. But of course, mail and direct and display and other tools, have the same impact of interrupting their lives. And then we take that, we match the likely voters, the voter files, with a lot of other information that exists to make sure that we're refining and continually figuring out what's the best geographic and demographic ways to communicate with voters. And then we serve highly targeted ads on people's mobile devices and desktops. And then, of course, this is layered with the video and mail and everything else that the campaign is doing, whether it's online or on television or on cable or on radio, so that the message is consistent throughout. And of course, the other piece is I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to make sure that campaigns are strongly investing in research. We're just completing some ad tests for our Mass Transit Now campaign, the Seattle Proposition 1 campaign, where we've taken 6 ads and put them in ad tests so that we know now in a qualitative way what is going to move voters in the very best way to guarantee our success in this campaign. Here's our contact information based in LA and in Seattle, and looking forward to questions at the end of this webinar.
All right. Well, this is Morgan Lyons, and I'll pick up from there. Thanks, Dan. I think listening to what you're talking about there really reflects what we've been doing with the VPT program that we're going to get into in a bit. but also on a larger scale at APTA with the Community Grows initiative, where we really want to focus on being authentic and speaking to folks directly about how transit changes lives and changes communities. And you'll see some of that messaging and some of the process that really builds on that messaging in Dan's work. So what we're going to do is give you a little bit of a tag team effort, and I want to give just a little bit of an overview on where we are in the digital space and part of the thinking behind APTA's strategy to go big on digital as we were working up toward the vote on the long-term funding bill, and also how we came about to create VPT. Some of that's a little bit of old news to a few of the folks likely on the call, but I think as you take a look at this slide, you see the value in it. This is, as my financial analyst friends would say, a market sector that sees no ceiling. It's just continuing to grow. This is where our potential champions live. They are active on these different platforms. We don't, at DART, don't use all of these because we really have to manage resources, and I think that's true in pretty much anyone's world. I think the same is true with the DDC work that's being done as well. But you just see the substantial growth in each of these platforms, and this is where folks live. And if we, as transit advocates, are going to be effective, we have to speak in those channels. And so using social media gives us the opportunity to interact with our advocates, and there's a discipline to this process. And I think this is where Teresa's going to pick up for a bit and talk a little bit about how we bring these concepts to life in the real world. Teresa?
Exactly. Thank you, Morgan. Hi, everyone. From a social standpoint, the way that we as marketers or communicators or advocates are thinking about social media as it relates to our political campaigns needs to evolve, much like social media is constantly evolving with us. The way that consumers are consuming their media is changing every day, whether it's on the social platforms or on a blog or through their mobile devices. So it's requiring us to set up a more disciplined approach to how we approach social media and the way that we talk to those folks in a way that resonates with them on the devices that they're using on a regular basis. So one of the initiatives that we constantly think through is how do we make sure from a social media standpoint and a digital advocacy standpoint the campaigns that we're creating properly aligns to reach those correct audiences. And once we find those audiences, how do we talk to them? And this slide is a great example of some of those disciplines and diligence that you need to have as you're running your campaigns. Many of you are facing local ballot initiatives or public perception challenges that will be coming up over the next few months or even the next year or two. Starting to educate your audiences now from a steady education standpoint will ultimately help you build that base so that when that critical vote comes up, you know that you can rely on your advocates. We always encourage posting once a week on many of the platforms so that you remain relevant and are consistent. You know, a lot of folks are looking at different ways to engage their audiences on those social media platforms. So you just want to make sure that if you're adding it into your strategy, you're being diligent with it and you're constantly using it. Because as we look at building our audiences on the next slide, we need to think about how the online space allows us to strategically target the right people on the right channels with the right message. You heard Dan talk a lot about that at the beginning of the presentation, and he's absolutely right. Maximizing your ability to communicate to the folks that ultimately will stand in favor with you on a particular issue allows you to be more strategic in the way that you talk to them because you know their values, their demographics, their locations, potentially their voting history. Looking at building out those audiences allows you to be more strategic and smarter in your communications on a particular issue. To build out the right audience base, really you need to start first with understanding who you're trying to target. Who are you trying to talk to? Who are those individuals that you can count on to stand with you on a particular issue? You know, if you're trying to target people based on an event, you may look at something like geo-targeting based on a location. Or if you're trying to build a following based on a particular opinion, instilling values for those folks and making sure that the messaging out to them is probably a better way to think about it. But any way that you are challenged in the issues that you're facing, you want to make sure that you're developing an audience profile of who you want to reach, and then you'll find the use for this information to create a lookalike audience for future modeling and scalabilities across your campaigns, because the education and the insights have showed you who the right people are to talk to, thereby maximizing your efficiencies. The question then becomes, how do you reach them? A lot of the online tools now are helping us identify patterns, identify online behaviors, track folks through cookies, to really create, again, that lookalike modeling that shows us where our audience is, where they're consuming their content, their media, where we can engage with them, that allows us to develop a persona about them and create those audiences in the space to make sure that we're talking to them in the right kind of way. The challenge then becomes, you know, what do you say to them? How do you begin to engage them and ultimately cut through the clutter of everything else that's going on, particularly in this election season that we're all facing right now? One of the best ways to do that is tell a story. Come up with a compelling message that ultimately resonates with your audience and allows you to tell the big picture story from an emotional standpoint, overlaid with some of those key facts and figures that are ultimately moving your audiences into a call to action so that you can rely on them when they go to the polls on election day. If you're legislative, regulatory, or ballot focused, instilling that urgency to take action is a great way to really pull your audiences in and become those strong advocates. On the next slide, you'll see a lot of folks are asking us, you know, what's happening in the social media space? How can we properly leverage social media as part of our campaigns? And I always provide 3 core areas of focus. The first being social strategy. Back to what I was talking about a little bit at the front side, where you want to make sure that within your social media campaigns, you're building and engaging your advocates in a meaningful way, creating content, monitoring who's saying what organization, maintaining your diligence of having that online social presence with relevant content being posted on a set cadence, but also using social to activate your audiences. It can add another layer of complexity to your strategy, but it also adds another layer of cohesion that brings together advocates in the online space that ultimately advances your mission forward. Social listening is another great area. You know, influencers, we're all wondering who is the influencer in the online space. Kim Kardashian is a great example, but she's probably not talking about transit initiatives for in your space that are talking about your issues that you can rely on to become those champions for you and ultimately patrol the community to make sure that what's being said about you is factually correct. You can establish your tone of voice. You can also see from a market perception standpoint where you're fitting in and making sure that you are ultimately creating content that addresses that and allows your positives and your negatives of your stories to come through in a way that is beneficial to the issue that you're working on. But ultimately, rapid response. You know, many of you all have faced challenging situations in which perhaps something has happened in the online space and you've needed to respond quickly. Making sure that you're monitoring what's happening on a regular basis, engaging with advocates in the online conversation so that negative comments don't sit out there, or if you have a crisis that unfortunately happens, responding back in real time, getting advocates information as quickly as possible. You then are transitioning into becoming a reliable and credible source that your advocates can count on for that up-to-date information. You know, on the next slide, you'll also see a few other things that we're seeing in the space that is new that I would encourage you to think about as you are working through your ballot initiatives. A couple of these you heard Dan mention at the beginning of the presentation, but I would add just a couple of other pieces to it. Videos and animated GIFs are fantastic ways to break through the clutter. Individuals consuming media love videos. They love to be able to see a story play out before them in an animated motion graphic way, or even in a short snippet that brings to life the content and the messages that they're reading about. They perform well on the social properties. They perform well across other platforms. Audiences are engaging at a higher rate with video content than with static content. It allows you to maintain that relevance out to them, but also because the platforms are already optimizing for it. You look at Facebook or Snapchat or even Instagram where you're scrolling down through your news feed and your videos are auto-playing. That's done intentionally for you to engage further with that content. So leveraging that to your benefit ultimately gives you a way to tell that story in a meaningful way that ultimately helps you break through the clutter. Another great example is on Snapchat and quite frankly Instagram as well. Advertisers are now having the opportunities to talk to their audiences through these different platforms. You can look at different things like geofencing with custom filters to make sure that you are talking to the right audiences. So if you've got a set profile for someone that you want to reach, using these platforms to get to them is ultimately a great way to do that, because the evolution of shortened content has allowed us to base our online behaviors of these advocates in such a way that we can reach them in a different way. The preferences and the behaviors helps you ensure that the content that you're creating is relevant directly back to those folks. And finally, I think the biggest thing for us is in the big data space, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are seeing this across the industries that you're working in, but the insights from the data that we're seeing is changing the way that we do business and the way that we communicate with our advocates. We have more data available than ever before. This data is allowing us to narrowcast our efficiency and our effectiveness for our campaigns because we're modeling on top of consumer data with media consumption data, with voter data, and then layering in some of the behavioral data that ultimately allows us to pinpoint exactly who the right audiences are that we need to talk to, which becomes very meaningful as you look across the campaigns. So what does this look like in practical application? As you'll see on the audience discovery slide, every data point that you're leveraging is really working together, harmoniously working to create that synergy in building your audience intelligence platform. Each one of those data points is feeding into that central intelligence area that's allowing you to create content from a knowledge and an education standpoint, so that as you're pushing it back out to your audiences, you know it's relevant, you know it's timely, you know that it's talking to the right folks, and ultimately you're able to optimize on that because you're able to see in real time what's working based on these back-end tools and based on some of the way the platforms work. So it really brings it to life in a meaningful way that helps your campaign succeed more so. So with that, I'll leave you with just a couple of best practices in the digital space. This is something that I'm sure many of you are already doing, but I like to offer it as just a gentle reminder. Constant evolution. Make sure your content is not stagnant, that you're creating relevant content tying into current events and to the messaging that you are ultimately trying to push forward. Target the right audience. Know who your audiences are. Create a strategy that aligns properly with them and that your messaging is going out to them. Social is mobile. Everybody's consuming content on mobile devices these days. Make sure you're creating content that is mobile friendly, whether it's banner ads for recruitment or messaging that you're pushing out via Facebook ads, or even just your outbound email communications with links back to your social properties. Make sure everything is optimized for a mobile device. Video content, like I said, interactive visual content is always, always better to engage an audience. And finally, tell your story. Each and every one of you have a way of telling the bigger picture story of how public transportation benefits your community, whether it's through the impacts of that ballot measure or through the work that your transit system in your local area is doing. Find a way to tell that story in a face-to-face manner that allows your advocates to understand it, be part of it, and use it to your benefit. With that, Morgan's going to talk a little bit about how VPT is embodying a lot of these different approaches and how we continue to evolve the program to help support some of these upcoming ballot initiatives that many of you are facing.
Thanks very much. So what I want to do is take a moment and first thank those of you on the call who have been part of the VPT advocate community for making that investment and really helping us get where we needed to go, which was to get the FAST Act done. So we've done that just about a year ago in December of last year. Now what we have to look forward to in 40 some odd days is an election, and then shortly after that a new Congress and a new administration. And so one of the things we want to do is begin to look at how we can build on the momentum from the FAST Act and the various transit referenda to begin pressing our case and telling our story to a new administration and new members of Congress, keeping in mind that while we have not even had the FAST Act for a year, we're already starting work on a bill that will come up in 2020. And all of this is really tied towards continuing to change public perception about the value of investing in public transit. And we want to take that from the grassroots to the leadership, just as we have been doing over the past couple of years with the VPT team. Now, where are we today? We ended last year with the FAST Act and about 180,000 advocates. Today, as you take a look at this map, you'll see that we have more than 200,000. I think at last count it was about 205,000. It is significant that we are in every state. I think it is more significant, frankly, that we are in every congressional district. We have VPT advocates in every congressional district. And so when we need to activate that community, as we did on the Highway Trust Fund, as we did on the FAST Act, as we will continue to do, we are able to speak specifically to members of Congress and make sure they understand the value of the investment in transit. Now, where does NAPTA come in? Well, NAPTA has been an amazing partner through this whole process. As Teresa and I were preparing for the presentation, we were kind of doing a little bit of a mental stroll down memory lane of the folks that we've talked to from the very beginning on VPT, and I think the NAPTA group was one of the first ones we spoke to in Washington when we first really pushed the accelerator on pedal on VPT. This helps us get beyond kind of us transit folk, the ones who work in the industry, and gets us really out in the advocate community. But it also helps us as we work on the ballot measure initiatives, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. It gives us a channel for showcasing the engagement. The VPT blog is a great repository of stories that you can find on the website at voicesforpublictransit.org. And so I think it really helps us create that sense of digital community with VPT and with NAPTA working together, and that sets us up nicely as we get into the work on the ballot initiatives. And Teresa's been directly involved in a lot of this work. This has been pointed out is one of the most active election cycles ever for transit issues. And so Teresa's going to pick up here for the next few slides.
Thanks, Morgan. VPT is very much focused on the ballot initiatives across the country this year. As you heard Morgan say, FAST Act last year was a huge milestone accomplishment, but the work is not done. We now are focused on the ballot initiatives that are happening across the country and probably are happening in many of your communities that ultimately impact public transportation, securing funds if the ballot measure is passed. So a couple of different initiatives that we're focusing on across the country this year you can see on screen here. That to say, this is not an extensive list. This is just merely a few of the big ones that we've got our eyes on right now, recognizing every community most likely has something coming up either this fall or sometime in the next year or two. The goal for all of the ballot measure initiatives that we're focused on is localizing the program down to the community level to make sure that we have voices being heard in the issues that are impacting our communities. So really giving the advocates an opportunity to use their local voice in their community to make sure that public transportation is properly represented in these ballot initiatives. You know, we've got some statewide initiatives, so if you look at California, for example, there's a significant amount of ballot measures that are happening out on the West Coast this year, as well as kind of looking across to some of those more local ones in Atlanta, Georgia, for example. We're kind of tracking this on two different initiatives tracks. One is national. So the most important thing that all of our advocates can do this year is to be part of the election series and actually vote, get to the polls and vote. It's our civic duty as United States citizens to make sure that we are doing our part in the political process, and educating the advocates on what's being said out there is one of those key pieces of it. It can also be used as a way to elevate the conversation in the local community, even if there isn't a ballot initiative being present currently. So just making sure that we've got the advocates involved in those type of initiatives. And then the second side of this is the customized local, where we've got significant ballot measures moving across a particular state or community. On the next slide, you'll see a couple of examples of some of the collateral materials that we've produced, and I would encourage all of us to think of ways to cross-collaborate between Voices for Public Transit and the different organizations that you all represent. VPT is a great resource to you in helping to spread your messages and the initiatives that you all are working on your ballot measures out to the advocates to get them involved. They can be another resource to you, another advocate army, if you will, to help spread your messages. We've created a series of materials that may be helpful to you and would love some help in pushing these out. Flyers, some window signs, some clings. We've got social share graphics, making sure that we are sharing banner ads for recruitment, some guest blog posts out on the VPT website. So we've got quite a few different pieces of collateral that can help and also be customized down into the local initiatives as well. So using those pieces to spread the message, encourage folks to participate in the political process, and then ultimately to show up at the polls on November 8th is kind of the focus for right now. I think there's quite a few ways that we can all work together on this, as you'll see on the next slide. We'd love your support in raising the visibility of the different ballot initiatives impacting public transit and communities across the country. You all are the closest to this and probably tracking it each and every day based on the work that you're doing. If you're willing to share the content that we're providing with your members and encourage them to spread the word, we'd love to have more folks be part of the process with us. You know, Stand Up for Transportation Day, the initiative last year ahead of the FAST Act, was a great example of the industry coming together in a collective voice to showcase the value of public transportation to elected officials so that, quite frankly, they couldn't not make a decision on the funding for the FAST Act. I'd love to see us do that again this year as we're working through the ballot measures and encouraging each other to be part of the community together. As you're going through the resources that are currently available and will be posted out on the Voices for Public Transit website in the next couple of days, if you don't see something there that you think would be helpful, reach out to APTA. We'd love to help create more content for you to help spread the word on the ballot measures impacting your local community, as well as using VPT as a resource for you towards that. And then we've got some other stuff happening this fall, and I'll let Morgan kind of close us out with that piece.
So after we finished the FAST Act, after we passed that, we tapered off some of our recruitment efforts, but we are again starting to pick that up, as Teresa talked about, as we work through the initiatives and really prepare for the upcoming legislative session and the 2020 transportation bill. So as we take a look at what's next, we need to tie public transit issues to the elections. If you listened to the debate last night, you might have heard a little bit about infrastructure, maybe, kinda, sorta, and frankly, that's been about as good as it gets. And so we need to take advantage of the strength of the community that we've built to get our issues in front of elected officials and get our folks to the polls when it comes to encouraging people to participate in those elections, and particularly in the transit referenda that are out there. And then we'll begin welcoming a new Congress and a new administration to Washington in the coming month. I believe today is actually National Voter Registration Day, and I think early voting is actually underway in some states. So it's really just a reminder that that voting is an ongoing process and recruitment is ongoing, and every day really is an opportunity for us to tell the story about the importance of investing in public transit. And so thank you to you on the call, not only for participating today, but also for the continued good work you do in helping us advance the cause of public transit and public transit investment. And with that, I will turn it back over to the team.
Great. Thanks very much for those terrific comments. We do have a number of questions that have come in over the course of the presentation, so I'm going to get to those right now. Let me start with a couple of folks who had a question for Teresa. You talked about some of the collateral material that was available through the VPT effort that folks can use and share in their local campaigns and efforts. Question very specifically about how do folks who are interested use that? How do they get a hold of the material?
That's a great question, Jason. I think after this email, if it's a group, we'd love to send out an email communication from Voices for Public Transit directly to the attendees with a link out to the toolkit materials for where it lives on the voicesforpublictransit.org website. We're in the process of posting it. I believe it's going up either today or tomorrow, and then we have a series of emails headed out to the entire VPT community, but would love to share it with this audience as well if that's agreeable.
Oh, that sounds terrific. I'm sure you'll have a lot of takers on that. A follow-on question to that, for folks who are working campaigns in states where you have a lot of members signed up for VPT, is there an opportunity to mobilize those folks directly or for the campaigns to coordinate with you all? Is that a conversation that needs to happen offline? How might folks go about making that connection?
That's a fantastic question. Yes, we would absolutely love to support. The request just needs to run through APTA. I can also provide the contact information for who that would be on the APTA side. Basically what happens from a process standpoint is those areas that are interested in leveraging the VPT community, you would just reach out to Mantil Williams at APTA, let him know what you would like to, how you would like to engage. Provide some content for us, and we're happy to share it out with the VPT audience. Just based on the registration and the proprietary information from the individuals, we aren't able to share the list, but we are more than happy to push out communications on your behalf to mobilize the advocates for your issues.
Terrific. This might be a question for all three of you, but had a couple folks inquire about if you're running a smaller budget campaign and you still want to have great animated GIFs and videos and other more targeted digital tools, what are some tips that you might offer for those folks working in smaller communities, maybe without a full PR firm or comms team behind them?
Well, this is Dan Cully. I would just suggest just email me and we can see if we can help out. We do a lot of transit work and a lot of transportation work. Sometimes we have budgets that support, big television buys and online ad tests and all the great things in campaigns and micro-targeting, and sometimes we have small budgets, and we're happy to work with anyone. So Jason, we'll talk about how best to distribute our contact information at the end of this, but happy to help.
That's
this is more, yeah, and this is Morgan. What I would say is just kind of a global message is you don't have to do everything, but you've got to do something. I think that's one of the points we wanted to make, is that folks are so active in the social digital space. You don't have to have content for each one of the 8 gazillion platforms that are out there. Find one and own it as best you can. Invest in that, but be active in that space. It is often so easy to be overwhelmed by all of the channels that are out there because there's just no way you can do everything, particularly if you're on a smaller budget. So I would just encourage anyone who's in that smaller space to do something, find a way that they can be most effective.
Jason, the other thing I would offer there too, to follow up on Morgan's point, as you're thinking about the types of content that you're creating, whether it's a video or a GIF, whatever the situation may be, think about it from the big picture standpoint. Create something that's a bit more broad that you can also scale down to specific uses so that you've got longer legs, if you will, and not creating something that's so specific for a particular ask. So, for example, if you are creating a broad stroke ballot initiative video that's 60 seconds in length, think about how you can chop that up into 15-second increments and use that for multi-uses across the programs that you're running. That will help maximize your budgets and give you a bit more content to leverage.
Thanks, guys. Those are all terrific answers. Sort of building on that, another question that's come in from the audience is, as communication experts, particularly in this rapidly evolving digital space, how do you create authenticity of voice? So as you're putting materials together, particularly I think on social, how do you capture that if you are an organization, a coalition, or a campaign as opposed to an individual, and have that authentic voice? Any thoughts?
This is Morgan. I think authenticity is key. It is particularly important in the social space because there are way too many people active with, at not real Hillary, Donald Trump, Clinton, or whatever .com out there. You don't know often who you're talking to. And I thought Dan's point early on about talking about what you're going to do and being honest and transparent about what you hope to accomplish is absolutely essential, because you're not going to cure all of the world's problems. But what you are going to do by making that investment is improve the quality of life in a really tangible way by improving mobility, by improving access, or any of those things. And just being simple and direct with your messaging. And it also helps that in the digital social space, that's really how you need to talk anyway. It is typically not lend itself to long form. And so you just cut through the nonsense and get right down to here's what we're going to do.
I would also add consistency is in the messaging, right? So if you look at continuing pushing out consistent communications from the right tone of voice to the right individuals ultimately leads to that authenticity, which leads to credibility and trust and response. To Morgan's point, kind of making sure that you are tailoring it to fit within that share of voice and maintaining it. Always following through with your online digital strategy to create that authenticity will shine through in a cluttered platform.
Great. Question just came in about digital advertising, particularly on-board digital advertising aimed at motivating writers to take action. Thoughts on the effectiveness of that as a tool?
Morgan, do you want to talk about maybe some of the PowerPoint slides that you all are using on your buses?
Yeah, I think the ads, digital ads really just work through everything, and I think it's a matter of using the assets that are available to you. If you're a transit property, taking advantage of the channels that you have available to you, your physical assets and then your digital assets, anything you can do to get your message out and extend the value of the investment is really important.
You also have a captive audience there too. So if you are dabbling with the idea of whether or not you think it's effective, I would advocate that you give it a try and measure the response and see how well it works, and then look at adding it across your different platforms or your different modes of transit.
Terrific. Dan, this may be a question for you as our campaign guy. Question about connecting these digital strategies and tactics to your field operations, your canvassing, your get out the vote effort. How do you link those two things together?
Well, I mean, they're there's no doubt it all has to be packaged together. One of the biggest problems that transit campaigns and ballot measures can face is that, especially in a year like this, every single voter who's turning out has an opinion about who they're going to vote for President of the United States. It's getting them to continue down the ballot and complete their ballot so that we don't lose voters in a drop-off scenario. So it happens all the time. I mean, we anticipate in the Mass Transit Now campaign, the Proposition 1 Seattle campaign, that there will be 7 or 8% of voters who won't make it all the way to the end of the ballot to vote yes on Proposition 1, which, people that will drop off are more likely to be our voters than not. And so a field effort to encourage people to vote, obviously, is less important in a year like this. But what is most important is for last-minute voters, for GOTV efforts, et cetera, to make sure that they finish their ballot and vote yes on Proposition 1. We have a very clear message that the most important thing on the ballot is last. And so to remind voters of that in our field efforts and everything. And then, of course, just the tie-in overall, these campaigns, it's so hard to break through with messaging, whether it's a small budget or a large budget. It requires every bit of the campaign to be completely connected from beginning to end so that voters are hearing and seeing the exact same thing, whether it's on their doors, online, or on television.
Well, Dan, let me ask you a follow-up there. This connects to another question that came in, and that's about sort of responding to the day-to-day changes in the news cycle and the overall political environment. We obviously take the point about the importance of consistency in messaging, and I know many of these ads are developed well in advance based on message testing. What do you do when the environment changes on you suddenly? Let's say you have a big ad buy from the opposition that you weren't anticipating, or some significant influencer in the community comes out in opposition to the measure. How can these tools that we've been talking about here be deployed to respond to that, or should we not be changing our message in response to those sorts of things? What's your point of view?
Well, I mean, obviously a well-considered campaign has prepared for all eventual outcomes and scenarios that a campaign will take place. So, we're constantly considering the possibility of no ads on the various measures we're working on. We're constantly considering the possibility of what spokespersons are the ones that are going to be the biggest problems if they come out against us, so that we've prepared for every scenario. That work up front is just essential, because you only really have one shot at messaging, and when you're in a response mode or a mode that you're on somebody else's territory, those are devastating moments in campaigns, and very rarely have I seen a campaign respond and still win in the end. It's mostly a scenario that you're building into your own messaging the opposition arguments and worst case scenarios, so that you can survive every single one of those moments. And your point is well taken, that sometimes things happen that are outside of your control that you haven't considered. And I would just say 4 out of 5 times the best message that you can deliver is the one you're already doing, that's providing reassurance that tax money will be spent in a way that guarantees that these projects will be built, that you're providing the reassurance, the accountability that is built into a measure is a way from the get-go to make sure that you survive those moments.
Great, good advice. The next question is about what do communities do between campaigns? That is, you've got a lot of energy and activity, obviously, around a ballot measure or a big legislative push, perhaps. But in between time, how do you keep those advocates who vote yes engaged or supportive of the system? Morgan, maybe this goes to you as someone who has to keep people engaged on an ongoing basis. But what do we do with these exciting digital advocacy tools in between election cycles?
Well, I think you've hit on a good point. It's not just about the campaign. It's you know, it's like the last scene in the old Robert Redford movie, The Candidate. We've won, now what do we do? And I think every project that we're involved in, and then this is a requirement, has a significant public involvement component. And so you've now created a community that you can mobilize as you take the region, in our case a region, through a transportation project. Transportation projects by their very nature are disruptive events. Businesses are effective, neighborhoods are effective as you're doing the construction, as you're doing the real estate acquisition. And in the middle of all of that, when the dirt's flying and stuff's happening, it's easy to lose sight of the big picture. It's easy to lose sight of why you organized and got people to the polls to vote for this. And these folks can be very helpful in advancing that message and keeping folks focused on the end game, which is to have an improved transportation system. I think on the larger scale, as we look at VPT, there are issues that come up through the year. Getting the FAST Act done was the most important thing. It was not, however, the only thing we needed to accomplish as a transit industry. And so our issues are always in front of Congress. They are, however, not always top of mind. And so communities like this can help you keep stakeholders and elected officials engaged and informed on the issues that are important to our industry and our community of transit advocates.
Great. Let me throw out one more question that's come in, and this relates to, I guess we could call them local influencers. That is, those voices on social media or those voices in the political arena who have credibility with large numbers of voters. What's the techniques or advice you might have around using these digital advocacy and messaging techniques to find those influencers and, I guess, ideally to mobilize them to be carrying your message?
Well, I can speak about some of the things that we're doing. Is we're actually doing more work in data mining to try to find those influencers and advocates that are out there. You know, the holy grail within the transit industry is to have as many choice riders or non-transit dependent customers as possible. And the social tools that we use in the campaigns are also effective ways to identify people who are either those discretionary riders, those non-transit dependent riders, but also people who could influence opinions about the value of the investment, or they may be having conversations that are related to what we do, and we need to find them and engage them in a conversation and elevate their thinking on the value of investment in public transit. And social media just really gives us a lot of great opportunities to do that. Teresa had a slide where she was talking about big data, and that is, there's a phrase that I won't use since it's a family program, but it's basically spooky and cool, right? And so you're able to get this information in the social space and then begin to layer other bits of consumer data to really create powerful profiles, and where you are able to speak broadly to one or two people at a time. And we've done some of that from a marketing perspective in the Dallas area with some good effect. And I think that's only going to grow as these social channels grow and as people spend more time in that space. We really have to become masters of that type of understanding and gaining those insights.
Mm-hmm. And leveraging those third-party voices becomes critical to what Morgan's talking about there. Identifying who those influencers are and then figuring out how to use them will ultimately help with your campaign strategies, whether it's somebody that sits inside of your organization or is one of your advocates, or maybe it's one of your not-to-be-known-yet advocates, and that's someone you want to reach out to, engage with, start the conversation with, get to know them, and then figure out the best way to use them.
Well, that's terrific. You guys have all been so good and just spot on with your commentary that I've had lots of questions about, can we get follow-up information with emails and the like, and I think I can say that we'll be happy to provide all of our listeners with information on how to get in touch with our speakers today, and again, the materials will all be posted on the website, and you can look forward to a follow-up email with some additional information on some of the materials that were referenced. As we come toward the top of the hour, let me just make a couple of wrap-up notes here. We've mentioned a few times about how important the elections in November are going to be for transit. That's why CFT exists, so we encourage you follow along with us. Check out our website to keep abreast of all of the late-breaking information on the transit elections on the ballot. More than 70 of them out there across the country this year. And join us for an election wrap-up on November 15th. This may be the last webinar in this series, but we're going to provide you with a free webinar about a week after the election to look at all of the results for transit across the country. I invite you to sign up for that also on our website. And in addition, our great partners at NAPTA, who have been part and parcel of this entire webinar series, and folks that we've worked with very closely on all these campaigns across the country, they will be having a face-to-face meeting of advocates conducted on Monday, October 10th. If you're participating in the Revolution Conference in San Francisco, encourage you to participate in the NAPTA event there at noon on the 10th. And with that, let me just say thank you once again to all of our speakers. Wish you all a very good day and hope that you will continue to be the fantastic advocates that you are for transit on Election Day and all year round. Thank you very much.